Before I start properly, just to say that I was on Sky News this morning talking about the report, and one of the things, one of the questions they asked an independent midwife there was about, the worries about blame. And I was able to respond by saying, I've talked to so many parents, and I know that parents of stillborn children are not interested in blame. They're interested in a change that will stop what we are experiencing to be experienced by anybody else. Every parent who has lost a child, their heart breaks anew when they hear of someone else who has lost a child, and that's what we want to stop. We want change rather than blame, except where you're that particular doctor whose negligence caused the stillbirth, and upon seeing a mother in a lift with the subsequent birth, then said, I see you got a live one this time. If you're going to come with that kind of thing, then you deserve all the blame you can get. However, that wasn't part of my plan. So this, first I just want to say this is, that's a heartbeat. It's a beautiful thing to see, and it sounds like this. Hopefully it will sound.
That's probably the best sound in the world.
Mm-hmm. That was my wife, they're saying, that was the best sound in the world. A healthy, strong, fetal heartbeat. This is who it belonged to. It was my daughter Grace, who was born full term, beautiful and perfect. At some point between the waters breaking and the midwife arriving, she had died. Some membranes of the amniotic sac had wrapped themselves around the placenta in an accident which could only be described as a freak accident. There are no stats for this particular type of placental injury. We are one of the people for whom nothing could be done. So part of what makes me really angry when I see those that could be prevented and haven't been, for people to be where I am when it could have been prevented, makes me really, really angry and unhappy inside. That was Grace. She was beautiful with her teddy. One of the things that was really important for us at that moment, we had come over, it was 9.5 months, very low risk pregnancy, a wonderful pregnancy actually, right up to the last moment. One of the things that was really, really, really important to us was this wonderful, wonderful midwife team who looked at us and remembered this, that regardless of whether a baby has died or not, and I'm trying to stop using the word stillbirth because I need people to understand that this clinical term doesn't fully encapsulate the fact that a child has died. There has been a death, and that death has psychological ramifications for years to come. Some people see me speak, it's 2 years on, and some people see me speaking here, and they think I'm dealing with it well. And actually, the reason I am here is because I am not dealing with it well, and I have to speak. That's 2 years on. There are people 3, 4 years on who are struggling to go back to work, who go back to work and they can't engage. The economic cost to the country is huge for those who are struggling with counselling, who are struggling to find their way through this bereavement. It's not just an immediate effect. It's not just an immediate consequence. It is one that goes on, that affects families, that breaks up couples, that affects people's ability to work. What was my point? Sorry, I keep getting excited and going off piece. Yes, this midwife team were fantastic. They remembered that regardless of the fact that a baby had died, a woman still has choice, that a woman's birth experience can still be the best it can be in a tragic circumstance. And what this one midwife did was said, I've read your birth plan and I noticed you wanted to have a water birth. We have never done this before, but if the pool is free, would you like us to use it? We said yes, and my wife was able to give birth to Grace in water, which made such a difference. Afterwards, the midwife on the next shift came to us and said, we've never even thought of that before. Thank you, you've changed our practice. And then she cried with us. And just to have that professional sit there and release her own burden of grief with us. We weren't carrying her, it was okay. She was with us, made, again, such a difference. The traumatic imprint of the whole experience was lessened by these two things. There is that moment when the child was born and we were doing skin to skin, and you just look, and you look down and you think maybe it's some kind of cosmic joke. Maybe she will open her eyes. Maybe she will breathe, and you ask her to, and it doesn't happen. And you realize it's not a joke. This is real. This is happening. I'll never know what color my daughter's eyes are. There are no words to explain the grief that comes with that. There are no words. And we went to a SANS group. Let me go back. What was fantastic was the hospital that we were at had a room called the Jade Room, and we were allowed to stay overnight in that room with our daughter, to have some closure, to have some time with her. Later on, we would go to a SANS group and listen to other parents, and in the midst of our raw grief, we drove home thinking how fortunate and blessed we are after listening to the stories of other women in hospitals, at their treatment, at the dismissive attitudes they sometimes encountered. And it was beyond belief for me that in the midst of grief, some people had to deal with treatment that wasn't becoming of a human. I want to talk a touch about being a man in this circumstance. Although things are changing, there is a great cultural imperative for men to be men and to be strong for their partner. But the definition of what strong entails is so wrong. If, as a man, you are not in touch with your emotions and you do not cry, you leave your partner on the outside thinking, am I strange? Am I weird that I'm the only one crying here? If you do, and as a man, I found it very strange. I had immense emotional pain going on, but I was aware that my wife had not only this emotional, she was still in physical recovery. She'd been through this physical pain. And I thought, how can I, as a man, come even close to understanding that? And the closest I could come was to make a decision to dig my own daughter's grave, to actually sweat and ache and feel muscular pain. It was the only way I could get even halfway close to what this woman, in fact, I'll tell you how amazing this woman was. In the middle of, we had an induction, which, having seen the difference between an induction and a natural birth, I take my hats off to any woman who's been through childbirth anyway. You're far stronger than I will ever be. But in the midst of a contraction, she turned to me and she said, I know this child is dead, but I will bring it into the world with all the grace and dignity it deserves. And if it is a girl, that should be its name, Grace. And then she looked at me and she said, if that's all right with you. Not really. Anything you want right now is fine, is all right with me. But one of the things I love, having read the report, one of the things that really struck me, my wife and I read it together, and we were reading it separately in our own heads, and there was lots of nodding going on, because one of the things we were picking up on was this desire to engage parents and to listen to parents. The death of a child is one of the most powerless, is the most power-leeching things you can imagine. It takes, there is nothing you can do. And that feeling, it's beyond dreadful. And we had, once again, I cannot fault the team at our hospital. And the hospital we're at has had a lot of criticism, but we had no problems with it at all. And we were involved in every step of the way. Right at the beginning, they said we'd like to do an investigation, but we don't think it's necessary because we think this may be the problem. What do you think? And they engaged us in that. They gave us the evidence they were basing that on. We talked to the consultant, but we were every part of that process. And in a place where power has been taken away from you, to feel empowered in that way was so important. And I repeat, it lowers the imprint of the trauma on the days to come. And I was so happy to be invited to talk at the Lancet launch earlier this year. So there was 2 of us there who were parents, and I got the impression that parents weren't often at these things. Why? That's an actual question. You can answer that in your own time. But I am very, very, very pleased that also this report is also engaging parents, because we're there. We're part of it. We can talk about the feelings. We can talk about the physicality of what's happening. We can add something, and in so doing, you empower us in a place where we are fairly unempowered. This reason I like this particular picture is because you have this ghost of a child, and let me tell you that it will never, ever, ever leave you. In my journey, I've talked to women. I was talking to a woman about Grace, and she said, and this was quite early on, and it really stuck with me, and just off the cuff, she said, my Harry would be 41 this week. And she knew without thinking, that spectre stays with you forever. And actually, if you ever felt love for a child, why would that spectre ever go? I don't want to lose my sadness. It's an important part of who I am now. Make no mistake that though I smile, that sadness is very much a part of who I am. And actually, the fear that comes with this, everything is fearful now. I think as a parent, you feel fear. You know, what's going to happen? My daughter's going to grow up and meet boys, and we all know how that ends. You know, that fear goes with you anywhere, but suddenly it's heightened because now you know that anything can happen because anything already happened. Imagine taking that with you into a subsequent pregnancy. And if we do have to examine our work in practice, let's think very, very, very hard about how we deal with parents of the subsequent pregnancies. We had a home birth with our subsequent child, and the midwife turned up with a student and said, do you mind if I have a student? What were we going to say? If I was in my right mind, I said, no, she's a lovely lady, but she can go home. But I didn't, and she stayed. And when the secondary midwife turned up, she turned up with a student as well. So when my wife began crowning, there was 4 people whispering at each other. My wife actually did this at one point because she was totally taken out of her zone, and her bit of choice was taken away from her. So again, for me, so much of this comes down to parental choice, to allowing choice. And one of the great things about the report in involving parents in investigation is, of course, not every parent wants to be involved. But the opportunity being offered will mean much more than you can imagine. The one thing that I hope that you will take away from the little I have said, and essentially I'm just repeating myself, is that the consequences of your child dying are not simple, they're not finite. They affect every other single aspect of your life from that moment on. My wife and I say that since Grace died, we are living in the new normal, because normal, in fact, it was to the point that when we left the hospital, we walked out together hand in hand, and we looked around, and we were both doing this independently of each other. We were looking around, and in my head, the colours of the world looked different. And as I was thinking this, my wife said, everything's changed, hasn't it? It was an almost physical change that had imprinted itself on the electrochemical makeup of our brains, at a guess. I didn't do the research. Engage with parents because their lives will change unrecognizably. Their lives have changed unrecognizably. And the fact that there is an impetus towards joined up thinking is such a beautiful thing. And all I can really do is stand up here and thank all of you who have been involved for pioneering and pushing this forward. Please, please continue to push forward. Make this clinical engagement be exactly that, an engagement. Thank you very much for your time.